Meanwhile, the ANC says it will be engaging with parties both inside and outside the coalition. The party is working on possible reconfiguration of the government of national unity. This week saw members of the GNU throw words at each other in their various press conferences. I'm joined now by political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng, who is going to help us just make an understanding of all that is going on. A very good evening to you, Asanda. Let's start with that package that we've just played now, where we heard the DA's Francois Rogers speaking. They're saying, look, national leaders, please just put your personal differences aside. Let's put the public interest at heart. Just looking at this week's happenings, how viable is that call?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that it's a DA person that is making these statements, because everything he said, I would have said he should be having those conversations within his party, because it's the DA that has regularly gone to the media at every point of disagreement. Before even the greater GNU comes to explain what's happening, they've been usually the first to come and engage. Secondly, he talks about how, he's hearing from the IFP, from members who are outside of the actual government of national unity at the provincial level, but he's not hearing from those who are within the provincial government of unity. And I find that fascinating again, because we've seen time and time again, Helen Zille, who is not a member of government, but is the leader of the DA, the federal chair, effectively. And we've seen her opine on issues that have to do with GNU and lead conversations on this formation at a national level. And so it's interesting that the same criticism that the DA is very happy to give of others, they're not being self-reflexive enough to be able to understand that they are the ones who have been doing the things that, for the most part, they accuse other parties of. And I think this speaks to the level of kind of inability to look in the mirror and to self-reflect of the DA, which has caused a lot of mistrust by South Africans of them and their intentions within the GNU, of them and their ability to set aside what is their own interests in the name and put forward the national interest at the forefront, and also understand that, you cannot have a coalition without some compromises. And so I think that the DA needs to lead in what it says needs to happen. And if it does lead, and if it does do indeed what they say should be done, then we wouldn't be in this situation, and the GNU would actually move quite smoothly despite ideological differences.
How do you think they're going to navigate this weekend's meeting between the ANC and the DA, with everything that we've been seeing this week as well and prior? How are they going to then manage those differences, especially with some of the contradictions that you're also mentioning as well?
Well, I think, this was always going to be a difficult marriage, as it were, because you have ideological differences at a fundamental level of economics. So while both political parties believe in neoliberal policies, the DA, is against the ANC's minimum wage, is against a lot of the labor laws that this country has, which are things that the ANC is passionate and cares about. And of course, particularly COSATU, their partner, is very much invested in and would want to ensure are held up and entrenched. And then you also have the fact that there seems to be an emerging, and this hasn't just been spoken about by the ANC. It's been spoken about by the ANC. It's been spoken about by the PA. It's been spoken about by the IFP and various other members of this coalition, to say that they are very frustrated in having the DA as a partner, because they are using every moment to try and push forward DA policies within the government. And so I think that the first thing that's probably going to have to happen is for the ANC to get a commitment from the DA that they are going to stop this behavior of taking every opportunity that should be an opportunity for negotiation, an opportunity for compromise, an opportunity for engaging each other and actually convincing each other. And they need to stop taking that as an opportunity to try and push their policy, even when it doesn't make sense. What I mean by that is what they are pushing for instance, a reversal of Bella, may never happen, not because the ANC doesn't want it, but because if you are going to amend or reverse an act of parliament, you have to go back to parliament in order to get that undone. You have to go back to the very public that you went to first in order to get that undone. And so what they're asking for is, in fact, quite a difficult thing, and it's not a guaranteed thing, even if ANC, GNU, and everybody agrees that we don't want Bella anymore. It's not as simple as getting agreement and consensus from the government. There's a lot of other work because we are a democracy and the public does have a voice. And that is one thing that I think they miss when they try to push these legislations and push these policies that are in the interest and in the interest of those they serve without thinking about the greater national project. And for me, what has been said is that this particular GNU has been hailed as the second miracle of South Africa because the ANC lost parliament majority, but they managed to come together to form a government and provide stability. And that stability was very much well rewarded by the markets. And in how the markets rewarded, we saw that in November and December the marketing agencies came out moving from stable to positive. We saw that the markets came out and retaining some of the ratings that South Africa had. And we've seen that there has been an economic shift. So the ANC itself has, in some ways, moved from a position of not wanting privatization and being quite against privatization to a position where there is a lot more private-public partnerships happening in government, whether you're talking Transnet or you're talking energy and the diversification of the energy sources and inclusion of the private sector. So it's not as if we haven't seen an ANC move both ideologically and in terms of how they are governing. So the difficulty that the DA in particular keeps bringing is harming not only the potential of the GNU, but also the potential, and I think quite frustrating for the other political parties because they're made to feel as if they are not important as partners. And I think what was important about the budget vote and how it went down is that the DA found itself on the outside and everybody else that is part of the GNU on the inside. And that is a very dangerous position for the DA to be in. So they are not negotiating, as far as I'm concerned, from a position of power. They're negotiating from a position of weakness because that vote showed, even if you have the DA, the EFF, and the MK, the ANC together with all the other smaller parties who voted yes, can actually push through legislation in parliament, which I think may have been a revelation for them. And so it's going to be a tough negotiation likely, but I don't see, unfortunately, the DA giving up those 6 ministries, giving up the access to the echelons of power through cabinet, giving up the potential to shape South Africa's policy, including, as I've said, the shift we've seen in engagement of privatization by the African National Congress.
Shona and Asanda, just finally, quickly, speaking of that too, of how the DA found itself in that dangerous position of being on the outside, the only party in the GNU as well. Deputy President of the ANC, Paul Mashadile, says if the DA continues not to support them within this government of national unity, then the DA should leave the GNU. But you've got the DA saying, look, we won't leave the government of national unity. It's almost seeming like you must then push us out. Where do we then stand? Where does that leave us in terms of the GNU when we have one of the parties saying, look, you can go, and the other one saying we won't? You basically have to make us go.
Well, I mean, effectively, it works for the ANC to have the DA in parliament because of the seeming investor sentiment being on the DA side. It also works for the ANC to have the DA in parliament because they're able to reveal the quite nasty sides of the DA, the incompetent side of the DA, and the immovable, inflexible side of the DA. So in having them in the GNU, the ANC is able to expose the DA. On the other hand, it works for the DA to be in government because they want those ministries, but it also means they also get to expose the ANC's weaknesses, the corruption, the widespread, channeling of funds within the various departments, and they get to learn from the inside what it is that the ANC has been doing to funnel this corruption so that it can be stopped. And so there is a balancing of power even within this, and it is good, in my opinion, for South Africa, because the more these political parties expose each other, the more we know and the more we can make honest decisions, rather than them being able to hide behind these facades and show themselves to be things that they're not, as we are seeing, for instance, with the DA. They are not the competent, viable, or even kind of negotiable people that they were making themselves out to. And remember that during the municipal elections, a lot of the partners that they had in coalitions warned us and said this particular party is unnegotiable and very difficult and inflexible. And they are repeating that history. And that is going to say something to voters who are going to have to make tough decisions at the municipal elections, and we're going to have to make tough decisions in 2029. And so only 2029 and the next municipal election will show us how South Africans are reading this. But unfortunately, it looks to me, from where I'm standing, that the sentiment is very negative against the DA, to a point where we've even stopped talking about ANC corruption and ANC weaknesses, because they have been putting themselves front and center, and therefore being more scrutinized in a way that the ANC used to be.
Asanda, a pleasure always to get your insights. Thank you so much for your time. That was political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng.